Hello everyone, welcome back to another news video here to discuss. We've got a couple of things to discuss today. I was looking at some signing updates, some injury updates, and we've got a couple of pieces of news, including around the Vegas Golden Knights, Seattle Kraken, the Ottawa Senators, as well as the Utah Coyotes for now, as we look at what they could do in this offseason. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the video here at the Instant Talkie channel. As usual, before we get straight over to the latest video, and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support and every real tools of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all discussed in today's video. Now, as usual, I'm going to start today's video off by discussing a couple of signings. Now, the last time we talked about the news video, we went up to April 5th, all the signings up to April 5th. So I'm going to do all the signings from April 5th up until April 11th. So we got a lot of signings that happened over that period of time. And I'll talk about the signings that happened beyond April 11th in our next news video. So going over to the signs that have happened over the past couple of days. First, the Minnesota Wild have signed undrafted goaltender Samuel Halava, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, to a 2-year ELC with AV of $875,000. That'll begin at the start of next year. Now, he's been playing over in Czechia, over with HC Plzeň, putting up a 3.10 GA and a 903 save percentage in 28 games this year. Looks like a pretty good goaltender. He's still on the younger side, I think. So hopefully he could eventually be maybe like a backup at the NHL level, or at least a third stringer. So that's going to be a pretty good sign there for the Minnesota Wild to sign a player who's been playing over in Europe. Then you have the Carolina Hurricanes signing 2022 second round pick Gleb Trikozov, can play any forward position, to a 3-year ELC with AV of $863,000. They'll begin at the start of next year. Now, Trikozov was a really good player who was highly thought after. I thought he would have been the late first rounder in 2022. He wound up going in the second round. So far this year, he's been splitting time between the VHL and the MHL, which are the lower leagues over in Russia. And the VHL has 11 goals, 21 points in 39 games. And the MHL has 12 goals and 18 points in 10 games. So looks like a pretty good prospect there. I think eventually, after a couple more years of development time, Trikozov could be a solid top 9 forward. So pretty good sign there for the Hurricanes to get one of their younger players locked up on a new deal. Then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes also sign another one, as they signed 2023 first round pick Bradley Nadeau, who was a left winger, to a 3-year ELC with the AV of $950,000. That will be for the rest of this year plus the next 2 seasons. So that's very good stuff there for Nadeau. He's been playing over in the NCAA last year, over in the BCHL, put up 45 goals and 113 points in 54 games. This year in the NCAA league has 19 goals and 46 points in 37 games. So his first year in the NCAA, over a point per game. Nadeau's look fantastic, and long term I think he should be a really good top 6 forward for the Hurricanes. Now, his contract begins this year, so we may get into a couple of NHL action, maybe even in the playoffs, so we'll have to wait and see, but that's a pretty good pickup there for the Hurricanes. Then we also saw the Philadelphia Flyers sign Oscar Eklund, who is an undrafted player, left winger or center, to a 1-year contract with the AAV of $950,000 that will begin at the start of next year. Eklund's been playing over SHL. Last year put up 5 goals, 14 points in 48 SHL games. This year has 17 goals and 28 points in 48 SHL games. So look pretty good this year. So that's a pretty good sign there for the Flyers to sign a guy from the SHL. Maybe he is able to be like a solid bomb 6-4 for the Flyers, but I wouldn't hold my breath. He's more of a lower end forward, but still, it's a really good sign there for the Flyers. Then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes sign another prospect, this time Juha Jaska, who's a 26-year-old undrafted winger, can play both wing sides, to a 1-year contract that'll start beginning next year with an AV of $850,000. Now, he's been playing over in Liga. Last year had 12 goals and 37 points in 56 games. This year has 10 goals and 30 points in 57 games. So pretty similar point totals to last year. It looks like a pretty good player from over in Liga. Might eventually be a solid bomb 6 forward. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Carolina Hurricanes. Then we saw the Montreal Canadiens sign Arber Xhekaj's brother Florian Xhekaj, who's a winger, can play both forward positions, who's a 2023 4th round pick. Signs him to a 3-year ELC with the AV of $865,000. They'll begin at the start of next year. Now, Xhekaj last year did not have an overly great season over in the OHL, putting up 13 goals, 25 points in 68 games, but this year was over a point per game, putting up 34 goals and 65 points in 63 OHL games. It looked actually pretty good, so I think eventually it could be a solid bomb 6 forward for the Canadiens. So that's a pretty good pickup there for Montreal. Then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes sign yet another prospect. This time it's 2021 4th round pick and one of the Hobey Baker finalists from this past year, Jackson Blake, who was a right winger, to a 3-year ELC with the AAV of $905,000. That will be for the rest of this year plus the next 2 seasons. Now, Blake has been playing over the NCAA over the past little while, had 16 goals and 42 points in 39 games last year. This year had 22 goals and 60 points in 40 NCAA games. So he's looked fantastic this year over in the NCAA. I think he has a very good future as being a solid top 9 forward for the Hurricanes. So very fantastic pickup there for Carolina. Then we saw the Florida Panthers sent undrafted right shot defenseman Mikulas Hovarak to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $950,000. That'll begin at the start of next year. Now for Hovarak, he's been playing over in Czechia. Last year put up 6 points in 39 Czechia games. This year put up 5 goals and 16 points in 51 Czechia games. So looks like a pretty good player. Maybe eventually could be a solid like third pair of defenseman for Florida Panthers. That's a pretty good pickup there for Florida. Then we saw the Anaheim Ducks and one of their top end prospects from the NCAA, and that's 2020 second round pick Sam Colangelo, who's a right winger. He's gotten a 2-year ELC with the AAV of $925,000. As for the rest of this year, plus 2 more seasons, Colangelo looks fantastic. He played in 35 games last year over the NCAA, put up 9 goals and 24 points. This year has been a lot better. In 38 games, has 24 goals, 43 points, looked fantastic, over a point per game. And on top of that, also had 4 points in 4 games at the AHL level before being called up to NHL. And he's even gone into 1 game of NHL action, putting up his first career NHL goal. So Colangelo looks like he's going to be eventually a fantastic top 9 forward for the Anaheim Ducks. So very fantastic pickup there for Anaheim. And lastly, here we're looking at a major contract extension that happened over the past couple of days. And that was the Vegas Golden Knights finally extending Noah Hanifin. Now they acquired Noah Hanifin from the trade deadline from the Calgary Flames. I think it was in exchange for a conditional first round pick, a conditional second round pick, and prospect Daniil Romanov. Well, he gets an 8-year contract extension with an AAV of $7.35 million, and they'll be going to start next year. Now for Hanifin, I think that's pretty good value. There's a lot of talk that Hanifin was getting like an 8-year extension from the Calgary Flames, that they were talking about that in season with an AAV of around $7.5 to $7.75 million. So it's a little bit under that, but Vegas is a no tax state, so that works a little bit in Vegas's favor. He also has no trade clause as a part of this for the first 6 years before he gets a modified no trade clause the last 3 years of the deal. So it's a pretty good deal for the Golden Knights. I mean, adding Hanifin to a defense that already has Pietrangelo, Theodore, and young guys like Whitecloud and Haig is fantastic, but we will get to the Vegas Golden Knights a little bit to see how this affects their cap situation going forward. But Hanifin's actually had a pretty good season. He's been a consistent 30-point player. The shortened season, he didn't have over 30 points. Postponed season, he didn't have over 30 points, but the last 3 years, he's being able to hit over 30 points. 2 years ago, he had 48 points in 81 games. Last year, 38 points in 81 games. And this year has a career high 13 goals. And also has 46 points in 78 games with the Knights and Flames combined. Also has 11 points in 17 games with the Knights. So he's looked fantastic with Vegas. I think he's looked great. And I think long-term, he should be a solid top 4 defenseman for the Vegas Golden Knights. So this is a fantastic signing, in my opinion. And I really do like the way Vegas did this. So those are the signings that happened over the past couple of days. Lots of interesting ones. Lots of interesting ELCs. Plus the Vegas Golden Knights extend Noah Hanifin, so that's very good news. Going over to a quick look here at the injury update from the past couple of days. So we see that Sam Carrick has an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day for the Oilers. Blake Coleman has a lower body injury and is out for day-to-day period of time for the Calgary Flames. And St. Louis Blues had Torrey Krug out with upper body injury and is out day-to-day. So that injury update's there. We also saw Noah Dobson have upper body injury and is out for no period of time. Jacob McDonald has undisclosed injury in San Jose. Tyson Jost undisclosed injury in Buffalo. Both are going to be out for no period of time. Tyler Mott has a lower body injury and is out day-to-day for Tampa. Matt Martin has an undisclosed injury and is out unknown period of time for the Islanders. Domi has an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day for the Leafs. And then Stahl, Teravainen, Pesci, and Chatfield all have undisclosed injuries for Carolina and are all going to be out for a day-to-day period of time. So bad injury updates there for those guys. But good to see guys like John Gibson in Anaheim, Nicholas Watt in Vegas, Shillington in Calgary, McCann in Seattle, Nylander in Columbus, Murphy in Chicago, Kakkonen in New Jersey, and Edmondson in Toronto all be back and clear to play and gone back in the game action. So really good injury updates there. Good to see guys like Waugh, Shillington, McCann back in the lineup. Very good stuff there. But also bad news to see guys like Mott go down with an injury, Stahl and Teravainen in Carolina go down with an injury, Carrick go down with an injury, Coleman go down with an injury, and hopefully those guys are going to be able for an over the long period of time and able to get back before the regular season ends. So interesting stuff there. And lastly, going over to a couple of pieces of news to discuss from over the past couple of days. Now first, we're going to be looking at the Ottawa Senators and the Seattle Kraken, looking at the goaltending situation. Now there have been a couple of recent reports saying how the Seattle Kraken could definitely be using a goaltending upgrade. Like I said in my offseason preview video for the Seattle Kraken, they don't have an overly great goaltending duo. Ever since they came into the league, they haven't had overly great goaltending. They signed Grubauer their first year, hoping that he was going to be that stabilizing number one starter that they needed, and instead he has not looked overly great in Seattle. Definitely been putting up below Grubauer numbers. I mean, he looked a lot better in Colorado, and over the past 3 years in Seattle, he's definitely not looked overly good. So they definitely, I think, need a fresh start. Now, Daccord's actually been really good this year for the Seattle Kraken, so having him as like a 1B or a backup, I think, would be fantastic. But I think they do need to make some sort of move on the goaltending side. So I do wonder if they go after a starter like a Markstrom, a Saros, or a Allmark in this year's offseason, or maybe a Gibson. I think there's a very likely chance that if they can move Grubauer to another team, Grubauer will have 3 years left after this year at a $5.9 million cap hit. It's not a bad contract. If Grubauer can find his game in another place, that could still be a steal of a contract. But I just think that it's not going to work out in Seattle. It hasn't worked out over the first 3 seasons, and I think something needs to change in my opinion. So at this point in time, I think that the Kraken, the smart thing that they should do is to try and look for a new starter. Now, could they go after Markstrom? Could they go after a guy like Saros, or a guy like Allmark, or a guy like Gibson? I think it's very likely. I mean, if they were able to acquire Gibson, they can move Grubauer there. If they were able to acquire Saros, they can move Grubauer there if they wanted to. So there's a couple of trades that they could work. If they were to acquire Markstrom or Allmark, I think they would have to move Grubauer elsewhere in a separate trade, because I don't think the Flames or the Bruins would want Grubauer. But I think there's a very likely chance they could. They have the assets to pull it off. They have their own first-round pick this year, although I don't think they want to move that. But they have a couple of second-round picks, a couple of third-round picks for this upcoming offseason. They have a lot of really good prospects in their prospect pool, guys like Chalet, Furcus, Wright, a couple of other really good guys. I'm not sure if they want to part with any and all of them, but I think there is a couple of guys who they could easily part with if they wanted to try and get a goalie upgrade. Drigger's going to be at the expiration of his contract this offseason, so they could go run with a Daccord or one of those 4 goaltenders next year. I think they could be in a much better position come goaltending wise. So I would not be surprised if the Kraken were interested in trying to add a goaltender this offseason. Also looking at the Ottawa Senators, there's actually been a couple of reports recently that stated that the Senators need some goaltending upgrades. We're talking about this over the past while, and they could go after a guy like Jacob Markstrom. Now, not exactly sure who they would target. There was also some talk earlier around the trade deadline that they also had some interest in a guy like Rasmus Andersson. So could they pull off a trade? It would be a massive deal, but could they pull off a trade to land both Jacob Markstrom and Rasmus Andersson from the Calgary Flames? Andersson's going to have a couple more years left at a $4.5 million cap hit. Markstrom's going to have a couple of years left at a $6 million cap hit, so it'll be a difficult trade to pull off. But if they can move a guy like Thomas Chabot, who's been a guy who some people have said could definitely be moved by Ottawa Senators, I think Chychrun's most likely staying. So if they can keep Chychrun, I think that Chabot being moved is a very likely possibility. So if they could move like a Chabot, move one of their goaltenders like a Forsberg or a Korpisalo, maybe Forsberg's a little bit more likely. If they could also move maybe some of their younger prospects, they have a pretty decent prospect pool. So if they can move a couple of prospects, maybe move a couple of picks, I think there's a very likely chance they could try and pull something off. Now, could they move enough to acquire both Markstrom and Andersson? I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but I could see them try and pull off a deal to try to get Markstrom. I think it's a really likely possibility, so I'll have to wait and see on that. But there have been a couple of reports recently linking Markstrom to the Ottawa Senators, and although I'm not sure if that's exactly the goaltender they're going to go after, I think it's a very likely possibility that they try and go after a guy like him, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Vegas Golden Knights, now we just talked about them. They recently signed Noah Hanifin to a long-term mega 8-year contract extension, so that's very good news there for the Vegas Golden Knights. So if you look at the contract situation for next year, it's not overly great. They have a lot of big UFAs. They currently only have around $2.3 million in cap space for this upcoming season, and then they have William Carey being a UFA, Alec Martinez being a UFA, and also have Marchessault being a UFA, Mantha being a UFA, Stevenson being a UFA, Amadio being a UFA, and Dorofeev being an RFA. Now, I think they should be able to get RFA Dorofeev and UFA Amadio under contract for the money they have left. It will be fine. So that's easily for sure. Now, I talked about this when they traded for him. I think Tomas Hertl's a Stevenson replacement. With Hertl being the second line center, I think Stevenson's gone. So with Hertl having a little more term on his contract, I don't see Stevenson being brought back. So I think Stevenson's already gone. I don't expect Mantha to be back. Given the fact he was an in-season acquisition, I don't see him being brought back. He's a good Middlesex forward. That's worked out pretty well for Vegas, but I don't see him being brought back. And with the extension of Hanifin, there's no need for Martinez anymore. So I don't see Martinez being brought back by the Vegas Golden Knights. So the one guy who I think could be back, and the Knights might try and make some moves to try and keep him, will be Jonathan Marchessault. He's been a fantastic player, been a really good piece there. Also, William Carey has been a really good bottom six forward, so I could also see him trying to extend him. So I could definitely see both those guys. Now, I think Marshall's going to command around $6.5 million. I think Carey's going to probably command just north of $2 million. So you're probably going to need around $8 million to get those two guys signed. So with that in mind, I think there's a very likely chance that we see the Golden Knights move off some pieces in the offseason. Now, this is just me speculating, but if Leonard is healthy come the offseason and he's ready to go for next year, he's going to be into the value of his deal. So I could see Vegas try and trade him to maybe a lower end team or someone who needs some goaltending help. I think Leonard could still be a really good goaltender if he comes off of his injury and is ready to go and looks good. So I think they can move Leonard. Or if Leonard is still unhealthy at the start of next year, I do think there's a very likely possibility we could see him starting long-term injury reserve. That would save $5 million in cap space if they either trade him or keep him on long-term injury reserve. So that would be a really big piece to keep him off of the roster. And then if you look at the other pieces that they could do, I mean, besides Leonard, not moving Hurl, they just acquired him. They're not moving Carlson. They're not moving Eichel. I don't think they're moving Barbashev. Raw's been a really good piece. I highly doubt they'll move him. Howard and Kolesar are both really good pieces. I don't think they'll move them. Pietrangelo's a really good piece. Theodore's a really good piece. McNabb, I could see him potentially move McNabb, just given the fact he's going to be a year away from unrestricted free agency. So that's a possibility. I will see him move Haig, who's a really good player who has $2.2 million cap hits. I think with the addition of Hanifin, there's a very likely chance that one of Haig or McNabb will wind up getting moved. I think it's a very likely possibility. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens in the offseason. But I think if they can figure out the Leonard situation and move Leonard or keep Leonard on long-term injury reserve and then move one of McNabb or Haig, they should have enough cap space, in my opinion, to go after either signing Marchessault or Carrier, or potentially trying to upgrade and replace those two. So I think there's a very likely chance that even though the Hanifin deal does leave them with only around $2.3 million in cap space, I do think they'll be able to maneuver around the cap enough to keep guys like Marchessault and Carrier beyond next year. So let's wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Arizona-Utah situation plus potential offseason rumors. Now, first with this potential situation, we have had a couple more updates since the last time we talked. Elliot Friedman mentioned on the 30 Thoughts podcast that a lot of those players over in the Arizona Coyotes organization are feeling betrayed and lied to, given the fact that they're earlier this week a lot of hope and speculation that Arizona will be waiting until the auction to have any sort of their future be settled. And now at this point in time, it's easily known that they're going to be most likely moving to Utah. So a lot of the Arizona people in the Arizona Coyotes organization feel betrayed. So that's really bad stuff there. I mean, I really do feel bad for all the players who are going to be uprooting their families from Arizona. Also, all the staff who could be losing their jobs out of this. So I really do feel bad for all those people who are affected in Arizona. So I really do feel bad for all those people. But on top of that, Elliot Friedman did mention that a lot of the staff member would not want to go back to Arizona if Alex Morello was the owner. So I know there's a couple of stipulations, most likely that Morello would bring a team back to Arizona if he meets a couple of requirements. But a lot of people are really skeptical about A, Morello being able to pull this off, and B, a lot of people don't really like Morello as owner anymore in Arizona. So we'll have to wait and see exactly where this goes. But also, GM Bill Armstrong met with the players before the game against the Edmonton Oilers and did say they are going to move to Salt Lake City. He did say they're going to tour the facilities at Salt Lake. I think it was either late night on April 17th or on April 18th after their last game against the Edmonton Oilers on Wednesday. And a lot of people have even stated that this move could happen as early as April 17th, and they could officially be moving right before their game against the Edmonton Oilers, and that the NHL may just officially announce it as that being the last game of the first version of the Arizona Coyotes in Arizona. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens, but it sounds like April 17th, April 18th is going to be the starting date of the new Utah franchise. And getting over to the Utah franchise, Elliot Friedman did mention that a lot of people were telling him the earlier parts of the season and later last offseason that the Arizona Coyotes this year would be big spenders, and he said that that really confused him a lot because over the course of this Coyotes franchise over the past while, not only have they not been big spenders, but they have not been willing to take on money. I mean, they didn't even retain salary on the Zucker and Dumba deals, which is why they got so low returns at the trade deadline. But he said there were a lot of people who were speculating that the Coyotes would be big spenders this year. And now it's starting to look a little bit more clear. I mean, the Coyotes this year, they have a projected cap hit of $46 million for next year and $41 million in cap space. So they're going to have a lot of room to work with. I mean, they have guys like Voracek and Little coming off of their contracts. They also have no defensemen signed for beyond next year, but I do think they'll re-sign guys like Kesselring, Moser, Valimaki, Dursey. So that will take up a little bit of their cap. But they also don't have a whole bunch of forwards. So I think there's a very likely chance that they could try and go after some top 4 defensemen and top 9 forwards, because a lot of people have been saying Utah's owner Ryan Smith is not buying this team to become placement for the next couple of years. He's going to buy this team and he's going to look to try and make moves to try and improve this team to be at least making the playoffs next year. I think Arizona was already on the trajectory where they could sneak into a playoff spot as early as next year. If they are able to put a little bit more of their foot forward and buy a little bit more pieces, I think it could easily be a playoff team next year. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. But Elliot Friedman was mentioning like there's a lot of big UFAs this year: Stamkos, Reinhart, Marchessault, Matt Duchene. if they don't stay in Toronto, Bertuzzi and Domi, if they aren't able to stay with their current teams, Utah might be a really good place for those guys to go. And then they also have a lot of draft capital. We talked about this in our offseason review video for those teams. The Coyotes have 7 picks in the first 3 rounds of this year's draft. They have 7 picks, including 4 second-rounders in the first 3 rounds of next year's draft. And they have 6 picks in the first 3 rounds of the 2026 draft. So they have a lot of draft picks, and they can move a ton of these to try and improve for the future. I mean, they already have a really good stockpile draft cupboard. I would not be overly surprised at all if they were to continue to add some pieces. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens there, but apparently Utah might be big spenders this offseason, and whether it be in free agency or in the trade market, they have a lot of pieces to work with. Utah might be a scary team to face come next year. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about Arizona to Utah? Do you think that move still does get done? It sounds like it's very likely to happen, potentially as early as next week. And do you think Utah, if they do get the team, could be huge spenders for next year? So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. What do you think about Vegas? Are they able to keep Marchessault and Carrier beyond next year? And if so, who do they have to move out to try and keep those guys? Do you see Ottawa being able to acquire Jacob Markstrom? And if so, what do you think would be a package they're able to put together to try and acquire him? What sort of a starting level goaltender do you think Seattle could go after in the offseason? And on top of that, what do you think about the signings and the injury updates from the past couple of days? Definitely let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk about for today. Remember this video, and if you're liking it, subscribe down below. Thank you all for your support. So if you haven't already, don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Discuss in today's video. I also blog, talk about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. Leave a link down in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.